How's it going, everybody? My name is Christopher. This is my dad, Leighton, and this is the Oosthuizen Show. And today, with all of the poor weather and the rain that we've been having, although being in the desert, we do appreciate the rain, we're going to be talking about the downside of rain when it comes to pottying and taking your dogs outside to go potty. So today, that's what our subject will be about. But first, a quick word from one of our sponsors, or from our sponsor.
One of our sponsors?
Yeah, the sponsor. The one and only.
The one and only. Boy, did we get rain today. Holy smokes. We got some video and some photographs, and I spent the last few hours running around in the mud, literally like knee-deep mud, fixing one of our areas. And so, Partners Dog Training School took a pounding today, but we got through it fine. Everybody was good. Dogs are fine. Partners, of course, our main sponsor. We really appreciate the support we get from you guys. Let us know, give us some feedback. Let us know what kind of things you like, and obviously if you have a chance to come visit the school, we'd love to see you. And if you don't know, we often do tours as well if you want to come and look around the school. In fact, we had the ATF out this morning at Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms doing our inspection for our licensing, and she also, like everybody else, she had a dog question, and so we spoke about dogs and showed her some of the training, and it was great. I think it kind of smoothed the inspection over.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about how to get your dog to potty in poor weather, where if you live in a place that maybe gets a lot of rain most times of the year. I know Arizona may not be one of those, but Arizona still has some extreme weather. Even in the summer, you might have to, practice certain techniques in order to get your dog still to go outside to go potty. But if you maybe live in the east side or in the Midwest where you get a lot of snow this time of year, you also want to make sure that your dog is being able to potty during those times of the year, and so that they're not messing inside the house or causing more issues than what what you're wanting out of it. And so we're going to go over some of the potential things that your dog might do to avoid going potty outside, how you can avoid those, what steps you can take to make that process a lot easier. And that's pretty much the subject of today's show. If you do have any questions or comments, or maybe you have some history of your dog not going potty outside, it tends to happen more with smaller dogs because they're closer to the ground, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But if you have any stories, we'd love to hear them because those are always good and funny stories. We got some videos and so forth that we'll show today. So the first kind of, I would say, place where we can start in terms of something that you can do to help your dog to go potty outside. And again, like I said, this stuff can apply to whether you're living in Arizona where we don't see very much rain, except for today where we've seen, I don't even know how many inches of rain we've seen today.
Maybe 2 inches of rain, which for us is about
especially in a short period.
The whole year, short period, like in 24 hours, and we've got more rain coming tomorrow. And of course, this also applies to people that live in snow country, people that come across rain all the time. Training your dog to be able to go outside and go potty in the rain is a critical thing. And we've got some tips we're going to run through for you. You want me to start on that, or you want to go through?
Well, we can. I'll start on the first one. So the one alternative, and we tend not to recommend this too often, but if you do live in an environment where it's almost impossible to be able to take your dog outside effectively, maybe there's a ton of snow where you can't even open up your door and you can't even get outside sometimes of the year, or maybe you live in an apartment building where outside access to potty areas isn't as applicable, then potentially looking at teaching your dog to potty inside, either on a potty pad or on a piece of artificial grass that has some type of catch at the bottom. That might be one instance where that would make sense for you and your dog if you're not able to properly teach them how to potty outside in the backyard.
And let me tell a little bit about a potty pad. For those of you who don't know, potty pad is as Christopher said, just a pad. It often has an odor of urine on it, which attracts the dogs, makes them want to go potty on that. You buy it at your local pet food store, PetSmart, Petco, one of those places. You get them in a pack normally. But you have to, like everything, you got to train your dog onto that. So the simplest way to do it is place the potty pad in a crated area or like an X-pen area. When the dog goes pee on it, you reward the dog, give them a treat, tell them good dogs. Try and build a queue. We can talk about queues here in a second, in a little bit more detail, but add a queue to that so the dog learns when they do go potty on that potty pad, then of course that they get something for that, and you that way you connect the instruction or the cue or the command or whatever you want to call it to the actual behavior of going potty. Now, you don't have to use potty pads. You can use newspaper. In the old days, before we had these fancy potty pads, We used to use newspaper. We used to put newspaper down. The dog would potty on the newspaper, pee, whatever. Then you just pick up the top couple of sheets. So you'd obviously put down like 4 or 5 or 6 or 10, whatever sheets, and you just pick up the top one. That way the odor is still there and the dog gets attracted to that. Now, one of the things that I don't like about potty pads is you are in effect training your dog to go potty inside the house. So this is, as Christopher said, for people that live in apartments, if you absolutely cannot get your dog outside. But for the most part, if you can get your dog outside, that's what we would prefer. And for that, backyard potty areas.
Yeah, so installing or having some type of covered area outside, especially during these times of the years where the weather is a little bit more extreme, or if you're living in Arizona and maybe it's very hot outside, it might be difficult for your dog to actually go potty outside because their feet are getting burned. We talked about that in another episode. So having a backyard potty area that is covered, that maybe has some sand or some gravel or some little pea stones inside of it, so that way pea gravel, yeah. So that way it's comfortable and enticing and absorbent, and so it encourages your dog to go potty in that area. And really, actually focusing on directing your dog to potty in the same area as best as you can each time. A, that makes it easier for cleanup for you, and B, it helps establish that potty behavior a lot more solidly in the beginning. So that way you can have success in that environment. And again, like I said, if you have a backyard potty area that's covered, so that way it protects it from the rain, or maybe it protects it from the snowfall a little bit, or it makes it easier if you do need to take your dog outside in the summer and they've got a little bit of shade, so they've got, the ground is not as hot in that area. That is a really, really effective way to kind of set up the best chance of success for your dog to potty outside.
Now, I've got a cool story about that. So a while back, we were training Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper, the rock star, really cool dude, by the way. Him and his wife Cheryl, phenomenal people. We've actually good friends with them. But they were having a specific problem with their dog, and the dog would not want to go potty outside, just too attached to them. So that's something I want to always mention as well. Is if you have a dog that's really codependent on you, then you've got to really stick it out. Take them outside. Force them to go potty in that area. Don't let them become all playful with you. Don't give them any kind of reward or any kind of satisfaction. Don't let them sniff the bushes and enjoy the scenery and all those things while they're supposed to be going potty, because all of those will distract them from what you really want, which is go potty. And if you don't do that, then it ends up being an issue later on. And it was actually kind of cool because I kept saying to Alice, and he was loving on his dog, and I was like, okay, like I want a little less loving, a little more working. And he looked at me like, dude, who the hell are you to tell me what to do? He was cool, but I was definitely thinking a little out of my space there with him. I got a little starstruck with talking to the Alice Cooper about it. But anyway.
Well, and another point on that, in terms of dogs that maybe have siblings or other dogs in the house, them playing with each other is.
We've actually got some video about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's what I was kind of directing towards. So dogs that play with each other while they're outside, they might be playing so often that they're not actually thinking about going potty, and then the second you bring them back inside from playing outside, then they go potty inside, which obviously is not the behavior that you want instilled, and it's really just because there was too much distractions outside. So if that is what's happening in your household, obviously making your dogs go outside and go potty one by one, and then giving them time to play
putting
afterwards.
Them on a leash,
putting them on a leash.
Each dog on a leash, like we use Alessandra sometimes.
Yep.
She's got to take her dog go potty, and that way we keep the big dogs away from her and so forth.
Exactly.
Let's look at that video, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the potty habits in this video.
Yeah, so let me see here if I can...
So there you can see some of the rain today. It was belting down.
Yeah.
That's Sarah. I got her to go outside with Coco. That's Coco, our dog. Just after Coco came back from the groomers, I might add. So yeah, that was probably not the most intelligent thing. You can see the other dogs kind of hanging out. The big dogs don't care. They go out in the rain. They're not worried about it. But you can see we sent Coco out, and I did this because we wanted to show you we can actually send her to go potty on her own. Now, I'll be honest with you, that's taken us months and months and months to teach. We still have issues with her every now and again peeing in the house, so that's just typical of these little dogs and so on.
And you can see here Karnak's actually going up to play with her, which is probably distracting from what we're really trying to accomplish, and that's what we were discussing right before this in terms of if you do have multiple dogs, you don't want to make you might want to have them go potty one at a time, so that way they can focus on that, and then they can
play that afterwards.
Again? Yeah, it's going to loop back here.
So I wanted to show you that she wanted to come back inside again. Okay, now we're back at the beginning of the video, so let's just let this roll. We'll show you a second time. We'll talk over it a little bit. But have a look for this spot, because this is, you can't see the sound obviously in the video, but you'll see that she actually, Coco, the little tiny dog, wants to come back to us, and then I think Sarah said to go potty, So there she's going out. She's not really willing to do this, but she does go potty. Now, the reason why she didn't pee this time is that we had already taken her out a little bit earlier. This was just we can get some video of us taking her out. So there you can see she's going out. She keeps looking back. She wants to come back. She wants to come back. But we keep saying, nope, you got to go potty. You got to go potty. So she'll circle around a little bit out there. And now you watch when I yelled at Karnak, like, leave her alone, then you'll see she'll start coming back and watch her hit the brakes. Sarah's feeling sorry for her. She's like, oh, poor little thing. Then she's like, I want to come. And then you see how she backed up there? It was us telling her, no, you got to go out potty. But really, I just wanted a little bit more footage to be able to show you guys what it looked like. So we brought her back inside, and this was the next step. I had to dry her off because my little baby was all wet. And she's a dog that does not like going out in the rain, for sure. Some dogs, you can condition them to that. There is just some training you got to do with them. But Coco, like a lot of little dogs, does not. She's been like this since we got her. Does not like the water, does not like the rain, does not like get her feet dirty. And so going back to what Christopher was saying earlier, we actually have an area that was grass that you saw there in that particular shot. But we actually have a dirt area where we take her to, where she has to go potty. The problem that we have with the dirt area is we live in Coyote, alley. We have coyotes, we have bobcats. There are coyotes out almost every single night on our property and so forth, coming through. And in her area where she is, there's a tree nearby, and there's no doubt that a coyote or a bush or a bobcat could hide in that tree and grab her or snatch her literally while we're out there. So you've got to kind of measure this stuff. And I mention this because this happens all the time in the north part here where we are with the coyotes, that dogs will snatch them up right there in front of you. So, we have the big dogs out. The big dogs do scare off the coyotes to a certain extent, but we have lost a dog and a cat to coyotes in the past, and so we're kind of a little sensitive about that.
Yeah, so, and another thing too, the reason why a lot of the smaller dogs have more of an issue is they're probably a little bit more sensitive. They're not as they're not as likely to go and play, such as like in the water and splash and so forth, mainly because they're closer to the ground, so that water splashing up in front of them, it's probably a lot more uncomfortable than for the bigger dogs, where it's a lot more of a game. Now the bigger dogs have a different issue, is because it's such a game, and you saw Crush and Karnak playing in the rain and so forth, that presents a different issue of it's harder for them to focus on going potty, even if they do need to, because it's so much fun to play in the water and goof around rather than do their business, which is actually an issue that we had earlier in the day. I didn't get some video of it, but it was basically we were sending them outside. They had just eaten, so I knew they needed to go potty, but because they were so distracted by the rain, they weren't really focusing on that task at hand.
I want to mention something just before we go on. So we see a bunch of you guys are signing in and watching in on my watch side, on my side, and also on the other side. And I also shared the post to a couple of friends, people that asked me during the week, like, how do we get to access this? If you guys can share this or do a watch on your side to your friend group, we'd really appreciate it. And Bonnie Walker just shared on our side. And Bonnie Walker and I go back, oh wow, she'd probably kill me if I tell you how many years, but it's a long time. She's a vet. She's over at Pima North, and she and I have been friends for many, many years. Great vet, great person, and we really appreciate you, Bonnie, as well, for everything you've done. So, and there's Niels as well. Niels' birthday is tomorrow. He turns a big 3-0 tomorrow. Yeah.
Cool.
Niels is one of our shooting friends.
Yeah, and so Susan commented here. She says, I've not had issues with this, but I raised them to play outside no matter what the weather was, starting at 5 to 6 weeks. And that was actually a good intro to the next section, which is really another phase of socialization in your kind of puppy training. So you have socialization to other people, and you have socialization to other dogs, and the socialization to your home and the world. And now you have socialization to different environments or different types of textures and feels and so forth. So getting your dog to play in wet sand or wet grass, or getting your dog to get used to those different types of sensations and feelings, walking in the street, yeah, exactly, and really being able to encourage them to go potty in those in different environments and so forth will really help you once you get down the line. Absolutely. A year or 2 or 3 or 4 years later, and you have a bad storm and you do need them to go potty at that point. So getting their feet and so forth on wet grass, letting them walk around in those environments, making it a positive environment, so giving them treats, maybe doing some obedience. You can also invest in a large umbrella if it's really pouring down rain, and you can stand by them if you're on a walk. That's another applicable product to buy. Another good product is having some booties. Both this helps for the hot environments in the sun, so it keeps your dog's feet protected from the hot ground. Though if the ground is very hot, such as on like a 120 degree day, and you're walking on concrete, or you're walking on the
anything over like 100
tar.
degrees. There's actually a law in Phoenix now that if it's over, I think it's 100 degrees. If it's over 100 degrees, you may not take your dog on any of the city trails, city parks, and so on. And on those booties things, just also remember that you can actually still burn your dog's full paws.
Right, that's what I was going to say. If it gets so hot, they can still, if they're on there for
so generally a good taste is put your hand on the ground.
Yeah.
Put your hand, if you can keep your hand on the ground, like just palm down, then your dog should be good to go. If you cannot, because too hot for them to go outside.
Yeah, definitely.
I want you to play one of the other videos for me. Just roll back through to that video, and then we'll.
Yeah. So another good thing, and you'll see in this video here, we have Mika, who's a dog that is very anxious, has a lot of
scared of her own shadow.
Yeah, a little skittish and so forth. So you can imagine that rain and thunder and lightning and so forth would potentially be a poor environment. But because of the work that we have done on the socialization side, you'll see what happens here. And another thing to point out, before this, we really waited until they really needed to go potty. So probably a little bit longer than what they would technically go out for. They might go out 2 or 3 times in a day, and today maybe they go out once or twice. If they're a lot more needing to go potty, then they're a lot more capable to go potty in poorer weather environments.
More likely to, yeah.
More likely, yeah, exactly. So
and Sarah worked pretty hard on this. And you'll see this is Sarah that took her dog out and was filming. So that's little Mika. Mika looks like a miniature coyote sometimes. And if one of us guys, Christopher and I, were out there trying to film this, Mika would not have been happy. So Sarah had to kind of like do the thing. And you can see she's sniffing around. That's always a good sign. We try and keep them in the same area. This is kind of like on the front edge of our grass. But the coyotes hang out here all the time. So we're very, very cautious of this.
And you can see that it's not raining as hard, and maybe it's sprinkling a little bit, but that's also another good tip is obviously if you can, avoid going out. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Wait for a break. If you can avoid going out in the harsher types of conditions on those types of days, that always gives you your best chance for success.
Now something I want to mention as well that you guys might not remember is that, remember earlier on we talked about don't let them play before they go potty, right? So a little exercise, walking, getting the legs moving, that's great. But now it's playtime after they potty. If you allow your dogs to play first, then you'll develop a situation where they won't go potty because play is more exciting than going potty. And so it's very important that you do that at the same time. Now you can see here she is under the trees. There's Karnak at the end. Now one of the things that Karnak does, he'll bother the other dogs a little bit. He'll go up, sniff at them. He'll actually go taste their urine. That's a typical dog thing. They do it because they can learn from that what the other dog's doing. So he's peeing there. He's actually not peeing there. He's actually marking there. And so he'd normally get corrected for something like that. This is Maddie. This is one of the other dogs. Again, we took them all out. Actually, Sarah took them out on their own. We always have 1 or 2 of the big dogs out there. You can see him checking Maddie's urine or checking Maddie's odor, and you saw the little dog submit to Karnak kind of just in the top part of the shot as well, because again Karnak's a very much more dominant dog. He's our my Mel, and so when he's around then the other dogs will kind of want to play with him, but they're checking to see is that okay, and again they can only play after they've gone potty.
Another good tip for dogs that are lighter skinned, getting them some type of sweater that's made for them also helps in terms of their comfortability and going outside. If it's colder outside, some dogs won't want to potty even if it's not raining or if it's not snowing, but if it's just colder outside and they're shivering, it's a lot harder for them to go potty. So sometimes getting them clothing that they can wear to really alleviate some of that uncomfortability is also a really good tip.
Yeah. Now Sarah's dogs love wearing clothes all the time, but I can't imagine putting my dog in clothing. They'd probably shred it because it'd be fun to chase or play with. So obviously you've got to look at the situation individually and so forth. And then the last one, investing a big umbrella. I think that's a great idea. Yeah. So we again, being Phoenix, I wouldn't even know where to go find my umbrella. I probably got one somewhere in the garage somewhere. Yeah, Amazon. There's this thing called Google, right? But if you are in an area where it rains a lot, then having a large umbrella that you can take your dog at and literally train them to do that. Because if you whip out this big umbrella when your dog is there for the first time, then that would be catastrophic because there's a good chance you could associate first of all, the rain, the bad weather, the lightning, if there is, or whatever the case is, with this big scary umbrella that's coming out. So make sure that you gradually, like with a tactile thing, the different surfaces, make sure that you gradually introduce these things to a dog, especially if it's a dog that has some, just let's say, some fear association or some insecurities, or they're a little nervous to go out, or they're scared of men, or any of those kinds of things. Okay, take the umbrella out, keep it closed, get them acclimated towards that. There's actually a test that is done by some other organization and the umbrella test is one of the tests. They'll take an umbrella and flip it out the dog and then measure the dog's response to that. Well, I've always thought that's kind of a pretty extreme test, but again, if you want your dog to get used to being in those environments, then that's a good test. Same thing if you travel with your dog. Did we talk last week about the travel thing? We're going to do a podcast one of these days about traveling with your dog, and I've got some video that I shot. And then last Friday, I also also I'm kind of digressing here a little bit, but I had a really cool run-in. I had to take my dad off to, actually it was last Thursday, off to hospital to get something checked out. And while I was sitting there and they were doing things with him, doing a scan or whatever, I was sitting there and one of the hospital's therapy dogs came through. And of course, me, I kind of like watching the dog. And normally I'm not a big fan of these so-called therapy service, emotional support animals, etc. Mostly because it's just a nonsense thing. It's just BS that people use. But in this case, this was a genuine therapy dog, and I was actually watching them from a distance, and the dog was awesome. And then I later on went over to the handler and I introduced myself and talked to a little bit about it, and I shot some video of the dog. And one of these days we're going to chat about that as well. So if you've got any questions on therapy dog work or whatever, we don't do it personally here, but I can tell you a lot about that and so forth as well.
Yeah, so that pretty much covers everything that we wanted to discuss. Of course, always going back to your basics and your foundation, rewarding those behaviors. If you want to take your treats out with you, and if they do go potty, rewarding that, especially if it's a more common occurrence to have to go potty in poorer weather, you really want to make sure that's a very positive environment. If you can, try to introduce it as gradually as possible. So for instance, if it's just sprinkling outside, taking your dog outside and teaching them to go potty in that environment versus starting them off right on a downpour. So all of those things play into it, gradual association, rewarding, and things like that. And then we got one last
tip.
So
I want to go back to that cue thing. We talked earlier about cueing, teaching a dog cues, teaching them commands, whatever word you want to use. So this is basically what you're looking for. You want to teach the dog to associate something with something and then get a reward for that, right? The simplest way to teach a cue for the going potty is to have something out where you literally have a treat or have some kind of reward for the dog. Let's just use treat for right now. And you say to the dog, okay, go potty. And the dog's looking at that treat in your hand and saying, I want the treat first. And you say, go potty. And the moment that they pee, you say, good dog, and you pay the dog. Now, that sounds kind of like bribing, which we're not a big fan of. I don't really want you to bribe the dog, but in this particular case, sometimes that's a really good exception, is where I literally will say to the dog, you want this? Go potty first, right? And make your treat something small. Don't feed them something that they sit and munch on for the next 30 seconds. So a lot of times I'll take a very high value treat. So remember the difference between high value and a normal or a low value treat. Low value treat would be something like their normal food, kibbles, things like that. High value, something like jerky, something like cheese spread, hot dogs, any of those kinds of things. I love the little hot dogs that you get in a jar. They have really nice juiciness. Dogs can smell them from a distance, and it's really palatable to the dog, and so they really like it. So I have something that's a high value reward that the dog really, really wants. If you have a dog, and I'm not a big fan of this, but a lot of you guys like to feed your dog scraps and things like that off the table. If you have a piece of steak, don't give the dog the steak just because they're sitting there. Say, all right, let's go potty, and then take them outside. The moment they go potty, say, good dogs, and walk over and pay them with that treat. What you'll do by doing that is add much more of a motivation to that, to the point that the dog will literally go potty just because they want something out of you. And it's a really rewarding way to train your dog as well. So that cueing is actually critically important, because trying to make a dog go potty by adding a pressure to that, or adding a how should we say, like a compulsion to it. So if you say go potty and it's like a harsh thing, if you have a very sensitive dog that's going in exactly the opposite direction, that will actually stop them from pottying, and then you'll have a major problem. Then you're going to have to hire somebody like us to fix that.
And without one thing we forgot to mention, since it is poor weather, it is raining outside, we're going to have some lightning, we're going to have some thunder. A lot of dogs get afraid of that thunder and so forth. So you want to talk really just quickly, I know it could be a full hour conversation if we wanted to be on how to get your dog socialized and create a positive environment when it is thundering outside.
Yeah, so the problem with this, and the reason why, as Christopher said, it takes an hour to talk about, is there's so many variables. The biggest thing is, if you're dealing with, let's kind of break this down into two areas, right? A dog that you're conditioning to accept or understand or to be around thunder for the first time, versus a dog that's basically scared. I was going to say shitless, but I shouldn't say that. But basically terrified of thunder. And let me tell you, when I say that, I don't underestimate that. And I'll come back to that in a second. So if you're teaching a dog for the first time, the same thing would be applied to teaching a dog to get used to gunshots. So we've got a lot of people that are friends with us in the shooting industry, teaching their bird dogs or their gun dogs or whatever to get used to that, taking dogs to a range, etc. So the first thing to remember is you want to basically introduce it very slowly. You do not want to take that dog out in the middle of a thunderstorm for the first time and let that crack land right around them. The best way to do it is to introduce sounds gradually. Find something that makes a lot of noise, like a rumble of a truck, something where you're like near a roadway where you basically have road noise, and where that kind of like desensitize the dog to that noise. If there is a thunderstorm going on and it's not too bad, then gradually take the dog out, and then you got to focus on the second step of this. So the second part of this is use your obedience, use your manners training, use your foundation of your dog, right? So you tell your dog heel, sit, stay, and then when they hear that sound, you tell them stay, and you kind of hold them using that command. It's the same way that, and I saw Eddie earlier on, was watching Eddie Garcia, a good friend of ours. He sends me these videos all the time of him teaching his dog in the kitchen. It's so funny because Eddie's this big dude, and he's got this big Rottweiler puppy, and it's a puppy still, but it's a Rottie. And old Eddie sits there with these little treats. Said, "Okay, you want your little treat?" And it's so funny hearing Eddie talk like that, because you really wouldn't think it was him. But it's cute. I love that stuff. It's passion. It's like, it's excitement, and really shows he cares about his dog. And basically, he's just doing simple little things. Make the dog sit for a treat, get in his treat, makes him hold position. That's the kind of stuff you want to be practicing when you're around thunder, right? Okay, now let's talk about dogs that have been scared by this. And again, this might be a complicated subject, so if you're really having an extreme case, if you have dogs that are breaking out of crates or busting through doors or busting through windows, you got to call us and talk to us first, because there's some things that we need to be doing, and you might even have to look at using some kind of medication to calm the dog down. But basically, if you have a dog that's already had an extreme situation, you want to try and dull that sound. So the way we normally recommend it, like over a period like New Year's or July 4th or whatever, is add a lot of noise into the house. Put a radio on, playing loud music so that it dulls. It kind of creates like a white noise, but it's not white noise. It's obviously, it's really loud noise, and that will, it kind of suppresses the effect or the shock effect of that loud sound.
Using thunder vests to
that's a really good
them.
point. I'd forgotten about those. Good job. Yeah, I'm getting proud of you, man. You're coming up with some great things. So the first time I heard
have been
about,
around you for like 20 years.
Yeah, the first time I heard about a thunder vest, it was a girl called Kimberly Ring, and I met her at a trade show in Chicago. And I doubt that she's watching, because we kind of drifted a little bit apart. But she introduced me to Thundervest. She was one of the people that helped design and develop it way back in the day. And I, at the time, was a little skeptical, I'll be honest. So basically, a Thundervest is a tight-fitting vest that fits around your dog, and it kind of it's the same effect.
A little bit?
No, it's not weighted. It's just tight. It's just like a shrink wrap, if I can use that expression. A wrap. You'll hear sometimes people talk about anxiety wraps. It's the same kind of thing, and it's supposed to kind of like give you the effect of being hug tight or whatever. And like I said, I was a little skeptical at first, but the first dog I tried was actually Kalina's dog. Lycos, yeah, was a Great Dane that had some real insecurities, a little bit nervous, etc. And we put this thing on, and he was amazing after that. I could not believe how much of a change I saw in that. And had it not been for Kimberly Ring. And the cool thing with Kimberly Ring is, I saw the other day she just got appointed head of the marketing and promotion department for Arizona Humane. Not a big fan of Arizona Humane, just so we record. So I'm gonna have to call her one of these days and chat. But that's pretty cool that she's moved to Phoenix and is going to be doing that now.
Yeah, seeing as you mentioned shelters, there's I don't know if it's a program or they just accept a lot of volunteers on days like July 4th or New Year's Eve, where there's a lot of fireworks and so forth happening. You can actually go and volunteer that night to really stay with the dogs and just provide comfort, which of course can also be done with your dogs at home. Don't just leave them alone in a room. We've heard of dogs chewing through walls, chewing through drywalls, destroying everything in their path. So really trying to provide that comfort with your dog and be with them, so that way you can manage their behaviors if they do start to get a little bit worked up and their arousal levels escalated. So
and if you are taking a dog outside, by the way, in this rain and stuff that we're talking about, and you have a dog that is nervous and insecure, then definitely put that dog on a leash. We didn't get video of this, but Sarah actually told me that her dog had actually run in underneath one of our storage units at the back of the property, and she had to go grab the dog and pull the dog out. So be careful of that. Pay attention to that.
Yeah, definitely.
All
All
right.
right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Next week, we're actually going to be doing a Thanksgiving kind of special podcast.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be on Tuesdays instead at 6 p.m. Arizona time instead of Wednesday, because we feel Wednesday everyone's going to be spending time with their family, and so we want to make sure that you're set up right. We're going to be talking about Thanksgiving. We're going to be talking about the types of foods that your dog should and should not eat around Thanksgiving, because that's obviously, especially if you have a dog that's hiding or crowding the dinner table, we want to make sure if you are going to give them food, which we always recommend not to, but if you are going to give them food, which foods are appropriate to make sure that they don't get sick. So tune in for that next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Arizona time, and we'll be live on Facebook at the same time back then. And thank you guys so much for watching today.
Good night.
We will see you next week.